share your background, because based on, what I've read and what I've seen and what I've heard you say in the past, you were the first ever officer, CIA officer, to get arrested. How did that happen?
Yeah, arrested for speaking to the press.
The whistleblower, blowing the whistle, yes.
Yeah, so I had an absolutely wonderful career at the CIA. Absolutely wonderful. I think about it still every day. I've been out for 20 years. I still think about it every single day.
Miss it?
Yeah, actually.
Really?
I do.
What part of it
I'm
do
not
you
supposed to say that in public, really, because I'm supposed to be this dissident.
Yeah.
But, I really felt like I was serving the American people. And that's what I set out to do from the day I applied to the CIA, or I didn't even really apply. I was recruited. But from the day I went into the process, my desire was to serve the American people. And there were a couple of things I really, really loved. Besides feeling like I was seriously making a contribution, I loved the travel, man. I went to 72 countries.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. I spoke
in how many years?
In 15 years.
72. Were you married at the time or single?
Married twice.
Married twice. Got it. So it's
in part because I'm going to 72
totally
countries.
Makes, that's why I'm asking the question. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, there was one time I was in Yemen. And I flew back, and I got back to Washington at like 10 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, very stupidly, you know what, I'm going to go into the office just to do my accounting. So I go to the office, and my boss sees me, and he says, hey, I didn't know you were back. And I said, actually, I'm not really back yet. I just wanted to do my accounting, and I'm going to go home and go to sleep. And he says, okay, well, can you go to Khartoum? And I said, what? When? 3 o'clock? Today?
Like that.
Yeah. And he says, well, it's the curse of speaking Arabic. And I said, all right, let me go home and do some laundry at least. And I went home, did my laundry, repacked, back to the airport, and fly to Khartoum.
That's insane. And was that like on any given day, anything could happen and you could be on the road?
You never knew what was going to happen that day. And that was one of the things that I loved, was that it was completely different every day. When I was a little kid, my dad was a public school principal. Mm-hmm. And he had the same job for 44 years. And I remember thinking when I was little, wow, I hope I can have a job that I love as much as my dad loves his job. And then as an adult, I thought, I would cut my own throat if I had to do the same thing every day for 44 years. But that was the great thing about the CIA, was every day was different. One day, it was the day that Iraq invaded Kuwait, August the 2nd, 1990. We knew that they were going to invade. So I got up really early, took a shower early, get into the office around 6, and my boss is already there, and he says, don't take your jacket off. We're going to go to the White House. Well, I had never been to the White House other than as a tourist.
This is 1990, so it's senior?
1990. It was senior.
Okay.
That's right. So we go into the Oval Office. I'm 25 years old. It's the president, the vice president, the national security advisor, the CIA director, my boss, and me. I'm 25. The president sits down, so we all sit down. And then the president says, well, now what do we do? And everybody turns and looks at me. And it took me a second to snap into it. And I said, well, Mr. President, as you know, Iraqi troops crossed the border at 2 o'clock this morning. They took the whole of Kuwait. The royal family fled to Saudi Arabia, blah, blah, blah. But I remember thinking, nobody would believe me if I told them what I was doing right now. And that was one of those incidents where it was different every single day. I was the note taker once in a meeting between Bill Clinton and the Greek prime minister. And it was the prime minister, the defense minister, the foreign minister, and the Greek note taker. For us, it was the president, Secretary Albright, National Security Advisor Berger, Ambassador Nick Burns, and me. And we go around the room, the president's saying, would you like a cup of coffee? You want something to eat? Can I offer you anything? Mm-hmm. Everybody's saying, no, thank you. He comes to me, and I'm just standing there with my notebook. And he says, may I offer you something to eat? And I said, oh, no, thank you, Mr. President, I'm fine. And he says, oh, are you with me? I said, yes, sir, I'm with you. And he said, I thought you were Greek. I said, I kind of am, but I'm not. But I'm with you.
That's why he said, may I, you're talking slowly.
Like I'm an idiot.
That's right.
I don't speak English.
That is hilarious. So this is, so you're in from when? 90 to
Yeah, it was
04?
1st of January of 90.
1st of January 90.
Yeah.
Clear calendar. That's
Yeah.
a good way to get started.
Yeah, funny, huh? The way that worked out.
Pretty wild.
Yeah.
Literally the 1st of January.
Yeah. So my first work day was like, I think the 3rd or the 4th. It was whatever the Monday was. But my hiring was effective the 1st of January. And then I left, officially I left in April of 05.
April of 05.
Yeah.
So what was it like working under Woolsey?
You know, I actually liked Woolsey. Woolsey was not a good fit for a Clinton White House.
He never talked to him. He never met with them. They had...
Literally.
Yeah.
I can tell you that in his 8 years as president, Bill Clinton was briefed twice.
I know. He told me this. I talked to Woolsey, and he's like, he never talked to me. I never understood. Like, we never had a conversation.
We used to joke that he wouldn't recognize Woolsey.
Why do you think that is? Was that Clinton's strategy to say, I don't trust anybody from the CIA to even talk to them because I don't think they're on my team? Why do you think he did that?
I don't think it was that clean. I think that Bill Clinton genuinely didn't care about foreign policy, but he knew that Al Gore did. So Gore was briefed 6 days a week for 8 years.
So Gore spoke to Woolsey, not
all
Clinton.
the time.
And then Gore would deliver to Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a strategy sometime with presidents where the president doesn't talk to the director of CIA and they allow the VP to do the dirty work?
That was the case under George W. Bush. George W. Bush had zero interest in this stuff. And when it came, for example, there's kind of a famous story that came out of George Tenet's memoir. The torture program was, as you can imagine, it was extraordinarily controversial, but in a very small group of people. In the beginning, it was only something like 16 people on the planet knew that the CIA was doing this waterboarding. So
only 16 people knew?
In the beginning, yes. In the beginning, when they were coming up with a plan. So the way George tells the story in his memoir, he prepared the presidential finding for George W. Bush's signature, and he went to the White House. And when he's in the anteroom of the Oval Office, Dick Cheney walks in and he says, "Hi, George, what are you doing here?" And George says, I have the presidential finding for the president's signature to approve the torture program. And Cheney says, "Oh, I'll take that." And George said, "Well, no, I need to get the president's signature." And Cheney said, "No, I'll get the president's signature." And then George speculated years later that the president didn't sign it, that it was auto-penned, and that when the president later said, "Look, I had no idea that this was taking place," he was probably telling the truth. That Cheney was the one running foreign policy, intelligence, defense policy, and Bush just didn't have any idea.
He was the front. He was the face.
He was the face.
Similar to Biden, right? Because even
Very
Biden,
much
they
so.
asked him when Speaker Johnson asked him about it, he says, I didn't sign that.
Right.
Similar situations
I
with
think
that.
he probably had no idea.
Do you think the same applies to Clinton as well with Gore?
No, because they met regularly.
Okay, so Clinton was a hands-on
actually
guy.
a partnership, yeah. And then on the big issues, there were two really big issues at the end of the second Clinton administration. It was talks with North Korea and Middle East peace. I have a very dear friend who was a very senior officer at the National Security Council during Clinton, and he said that in that last week that Clinton was president, they were at Camp David. He was at Camp David with Gore, my friend was, and it was Yasser Arafat and Abbas, and it was Foreign Minister Shimon Peres, and I forget who his number two was. And he said they had this enormous map of Jerusalem and on the table, and with a Sharpie, they were literally dividing Jerusalem block by block. And when they finished, Gore said, "My God, we have peace." And Arafat said, "I can never sell this to the Palestinian people." And he walked out. And Gore ran out after him and said, "Wait a minute, after all this, you can't just quit. If there's something you don't like, let's renegotiate it." And Arafat said, "I can never sell any deal to the Palestinian people." And then that was the end of it. And Clinton kind of alluded to this in his memoir when he said that he should have pulled Albright out of North Korea because we were getting nowhere with the North Koreans. And he should have put Albright in the room as well to pressure Arafat.
Interesting. Looking back now, when you hear stories like this, how different history could have been.
God, can you imagine?
Totally. How different things could have been. if managed in a different way.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Kiriakou, former CIA officer. Please find me on Minect. We have a lot to talk about. CIA, FBI, DOD, torture, secret prisons, international renditions. Maybe you or your child want to apply for a job at the CIA and are looking for some tips. Let me know. There's a lot we can talk about. You pick the subject, we'll make it happen. Again, it's on Minect. Thanks, and I'll see you soon.
If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.